Hello everyone, welcome back to our book club.
Yes, welcome back indeed. We are your hosts. I'm Mr. Daryl and
I am Miss Maka. Mr. Daryl, what are we discussing today?
we're talking about The Man in the Iron Mask.
Ooh, by Alexander Dumas.
Yeah, the story of the early reign of Louis XIV. It's been called an origin story for the king.
Wow, and naturally in a novel about Dumas' musketeers, the characters play a huge role in Louis' education.
That's great because I love the Three Musketeers.
Me too, very much. But of course, before we start discussing the book, we're going to look at our agenda. So we will start with the vocabulary, then we'll talk about the author, Alexander Dumas, and later we will talk about the summary of the book.
From there, we'll look at some of the characters, the aforementioned musketeers. We'll look at the setting, France, and look at some of the main themes.
Yeah, and of course, we will never forget the homework.
Who could forget the homework?
Never. So what's the first word, Mr. Daryl?
So we move to the vocabulary section, and the first word, Ms. Maka, is to disobey. To disobey, which is to neglect or to refuse to listen to someone.
Daumorchilebloba.
Our next word is treachery. Treachery. It's a noun, and it's the violation of faith, a betrayal of trust or treason.
Ghalati, orguloba.
Our next word is a verb, and it is to capture. To capture. To take by force or by strategy, to take prisoner, to seize something. Our next word is plot. Plot. It's a noun, plot. A secret plan or scheme to accomplish some purpose, especially a hostile, unlawful, or evil purpose.
Nachazin, schema, sujeti.
We have a verb next, to destroy. To destroy. To put an end to extinguish, to kill, to slay, to render ineffective or useless.
Ganadgureba, dangreva.
Our next word is to fuse. To fuse, to join together.
Denoba.
Our next word is traitor. Traitor. A person who betrays another, a cause, or any kind of trust.
Yeah, so gamritveli.
And the last word of today, suspicious. Suspicious. It's an adjective. It's tending to cause or excite suspicion, doing something that's questionable.
Eჭვიანი, რაიმეში დაეჭვებული.
Well, now, let's ask our audience a question based on the vocabulary that we've heard. If we look at the definition of treachery, we can see that it's presented as a negative word, of course. Can it ever have a positive meaning? Can you ever betray someone's trust in order to help them?
I think some people might say yes, but for me personally, I believe it is never a good thing. Trustworthiness is the greatest value a person can hold for another person, and to betray, that means that your value as a person is broken as well.
Wow, that's a very respectable answer.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, how important is it for you to trust a person, Mr. Daryl?
And to be trusted by other people as well.
Sure. It is very important. And as we see, Dumas also really appreciates this feeling, right? So talking about Dumas, now it is high time to talk about the author. So he was born, Alexander Dumas was born in 1802, 1870 is the year when he died. So Alexander was a well-known French writer, and his father was a reputable general in the French army. With the influence of his father as a young man, Alexander secured a job with Louis Philippe, the Duke of the Orleans.
He enjoyed early success before he started working as a writer in France, but later left France for Belgium because of difficulties with the job. He stayed in Belgium for many years before moving to Russia for several years, even visiting the Caucasus, and then moved to Italy where he founded a newspaper. And this newspaper supported the reunification of Italy.
Interesting. So he's one of the most successful French writers, and his books have been translated into 100 languages. Most of his works were first published as serials, and including the Three Musketeers. His books have been used in producing lots of different types of movies back to the early 20th century.
Okay, well, in the year of his 200th celebration of his birth, the French president of that time said the following quote, and I will quote it for you. "With you," he was talking about Alexander Dumas, "with you, we were D'Artagnan, Monte Cristo, or Balsamo, riding along the roads of France, touring battlefields, visiting palaces and castles. With you, we dream." So basically, we lived all those adventures because of Alexander.
Yeah, sure. So now let's have a question to our audience. Looking at what the French president said in celebration of Dumas, why do you think he has been so popular for so long?
I think Alexander Dumas has been able to write exciting and universal stories and situations which capture the imagination of readers again and again, no matter what age they are, and this is the mark of a truly great writer.
Wow, that's a nice answer. Thank you very much. So,
let's move on to the summary. Very good. The Man in the Iron Mask, in French, L'Homme au Masque de Fer, born in 1658 to 1703. He was a political prisoner in real life, actually, famous in French history and legend, who died at the Bastille in 1703. The Bastille is a prison, a famous prison, during the reign of Louis XIV. There is no historical evidence that the mask was made of anything but black velvet. So this fact that it's in iron in this book is probably Alexander Dumas' invention.
Yes. The 268 chapter novel first appeared in serial from between 1847 and 1850. The Vicomte is the third and final book in these series, D'Artagnan romance series, that started with the Three Musketeers and 20 years after. The other two volumes in the Vicomte are also called the Vicomte de Bragelonne and Louis de... Oh, Mr. Derill, could you please help me with that?
No, Louise de la Valliere.
Yeah, Louise de la Valliere. Back volume is roughly the same length as the first Three Musketeers book.
The book is centered once again around the Three Musketeers. They are the heroes. The narrative of the full book takes place between 1660 and 1667, during the reign of the young Louis XIV, from his ascension to the throne of France.
Interesting. So the titular character, the Man in the Iron Mask, is supposed to be the twin brother of the Louis the 14th. Yeah, exactly. Who was imprisoned with his identity concealed by an iron mask by his mother and father.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah.
Few people are aware of this twin, Philippe's existence, until his mother's friend, the Duchess de Chevreuse, lets the secret slip out to her former lover, Aramis, one of the Musketeers.
Yeah, and Aramis creates a plan to replace King Louis XIV with Philippe.
The twin.
In order, yeah, exactly, in order to create a more susceptible king that he can use as a puppet. So he wanted to control the king.
He's not, so Aramis, the Musketeer, is not a complete hero. He's not a noble hero. He has his own designs and plots.
A bit manipulative.
Manipulative, yeah. Aramis also plots to replace Louis with Philip as a puppet ruler for himself and Fouquet, and even intends to become in turn the next pope. So his ambition is to become the next pope of Rome.
Oh, but when his plan begins to backfire, more than just Aramis's will pay for his cruel intentions.
Good, so you didn't give away the ending.
Of course not.
There's a question we have now for the audience. Now there's a legend that the man in the iron mask really existed. Do you think that this is a cause of the novel's popularity?
No, I don't think so. It is not the cause of the novel's popularity. Dumas wrote an original story of adventure, which would have been a great tale, even if it didn't have legendary beginnings.
Very good answer. Yeah, Dumas had such skill. He could create tales whether they were based on reality or not.
Yeah, exactly. He also added some his own things.
Like the Iron Mask.
Yeah, exactly. So now who creates this magnificent story? So it is time to talk about the characters. So the very first character is D'Artagnan, of course. So he is a former musketeer and current captain of the musketeers. He is very brave and very loyal, as being as excellent fighter. He is introduced to the three musketeers in the first original book, and when he goes to Paris, where he wants to become a musketeer, and he ends up to be helping them in a fight.
That was the classic story of the three musketeers.
Yeah.
But now by this novel, he's the only one of those friends who's still a musketeer and still in the service of the king. And he has served for the king for many years now.
Yeah, and he actually loves his friends. D'Artagnan really loves his friends and knows them pretty well. He is the first person to detect, to suspect that Aramis is up to something in the beginning of the book, and when he realizes the full extent of the plot, only promises to save Aramis and not arrest him. So he, because of the friendship, I think he decides so.
Very good point. I'd say I'd add this as well. He's the only one basically to put his friends first, and is probably the most moral character in the book.
Yeah. Our next character we've already mentioned is Aramis. So Aramis is perhaps best summed up by his quote from the book, and the quote goes like this: soldier, priest, and diplomat, gallant, greedy, and cunning, Aramis took the good things in this life, so stepping stones to rise to the bad ones. Generous in mind, if not noble in heart, he never did ill, but for the sake of shining a little more brilliantly.
Aramis is the hardest to pin down. Not only in the book, but in the entire series. It's hard to get an understanding of what makes him work, what makes him tick. He's an agitator, often the one to come up with the musketeers' greatest schemes, both successful and unsuccessful. In The Man in the Iron Mask, this book, Aramis's desire for power over France does get in the way of his friendships and loyalty for a little bit.
However, a true musketeer, till the end, Aramis actually does appear to love those he deems friends very much. He agrees to be arrested to Belle Isle as long as Porthos can go free, and is said to cry for the first time in his life upon Porthos' death. Yeah, when he died.
Ironically, Aramis is the only musketeer left alive at the end of this book.
Yeah, so that's sad.
The next character is Porthos.
Yeah, Porthos is one of the original musketeers and best known for being a gentle giant, unless he's fighting, and then he uses his amazing strengths against his enemies.
Porthos is Aramis is probably his best friend in the whole book series, and he dies trying to protect him. He's surprisingly clever. He's a moral man who willingly goes along with Aramis's plans to overthrow the king, but he has to stop and think about the moral implications as well. So he's a complex character.
Exactly, he is, and actually Porthos's death is the most remarkably expressed, shown in the book. Although he was a man of few words, he is very missed by his friends.
So leaving impact despite saying not much.
Exactly.
And the last musketeer, Athos. Now, before the start of the novel, Athos has moved away to live with his adult son. This is why he has much more of a limited role in this book. He's revealed later to have started a fight with the king, King Louis XIV, and as a result he left the Musketeers and has retired by the events of this book.
Exactly, and Arthur spends majority of his life, like in the storyline, thinking about how to send his son Raoul to the battle in Africa, and he believes that his son will die in this battle, and when this everything turns out to be true, he dies shortly after, and believing that life is not worth living without his son.
Honorable men. Now our last character, we'll leave the Musketeers aside and we will look at the man in the iron mask, Philippe. At the beginning of the story, we learn that Philippe is the twin brother of the king who was locked away as a child so as not to provide any challenge to the king's throne. It is not revealed why he was chosen to be locked up.
Yeah, and actually Philippe is used as a pawn in his brother's kingly rule for the first half of his life, and then of course he is used as a pawn by Aramis, when he wanted to take control over France through him. So only to be abandoned once again, just as the way by his parents did. For this reason, Philippe is a tragic character. A person who is easily manipulated.
Yeah, despite being the title character, we rarely see him. We see him very little in the book, and he gets to be king for a few chapters. The last we see of him, before D'Artagnan leaves his prison island, where he's left to wear the mask, and no one knows of his identity, and we don't really find out about him after.
So, as we've already shown the characteristics of our main characters, now let's have a question to our audience. So, why have the Three Musketeers been such classic characters in literature?
I think the main reason is that each character is very memorable in their own way and represent friendship in their own way. I think readers love to see them together as a band of brothers.
Yeah, exactly. So, Musketeers together, yeah? Thank you very much. That's a nice answer. So, now, Mr. Deril?
Let's move to the setting. Now, have you ever wanted to go to France, Ms. Maka?
It's not my top country, but yes, I would love to.
Well, this is a way to get into 17th century France. Since obviously it's a work of fiction, historical fiction, the setting plays a huge role. He tries to get some details right, and some are invented, of course. Dumas draws on the actual history of King Louis XIV's court to build a believable version of events. But keep in mind, he's literally rewriting history. He changed the composition of the mask from velvet to iron. And so he's not afraid to change details to suit the story.
Yeah, and what about the where part? So it happens in the court of King Louis XIV, and since the story is mostly driven by the plot and the dialogue, the settings in The Man of the Iron Mask usually do not matter so much. The characters usually hang out in some kind of chambers, or like bed chambers, but in some kind of prison cell or audience hall. And Dumas does have a tendency to stage some things and the settings in a very beautiful way. And characters, however, he really pays attention to the settings of a scene.
Now, the theatrical quality of the scene tends to reflect Dumas' previous career as a dramatist. There's a scene with a black horse that runs through plowed fields. It's very visual. And then the scene with the destruction of the grotto, very spectacularly described. So he has this kind of theatrical quality to him. His quieter scenes are also given quite a lot of attention. The scene between Aramis and Philippe in the forest is a good example, as you'll see if you read it. And Athos and Raoul's grave sites at the little chapel are described in really amazing detail.
So, Mr. Derill, so I think that the reader should expect lots of adjectives describing the scenes in Alexander Dumas' books.
That can be the fun of it. Now, what about a question for the audience? How would you describe the writing style of Dumas?
Well, speaking from description you have given so far, I would say that Dumas is like a modern blockbuster movie maker. And if he was alive today, I believe he would be making action movies with millions of dollars of budget.
Yeah, sounds about right. He's making like historical epics. He might have made like Braveheart or something.
Yeah, something like this. So now let's talk about the major themes of the book. And the first theme is friendship, of course, because we all remember the famous quote from the Musketeers, right? All for one and one for all. So friendship is the backbone of the man in the iron mask. But it rapidly disintegrates throughout the book. And the four men, once bound by the motto that I've already mentioned, have grown apart from one another.
And there's several reasons for this. There are political reasons, familial reasons, family reasons, and career motivations that bring them apart. They're one strong friendship. It was simple, and now it's a complex situation.
Do you think Dumas wanted to say that there are some reasons that might have a problem between the friends?
I think Dumas was a bit of a realist as well. He knew that friendship could never be idealistically perfect as you live your life. Things are going to happen, you're going to break apart, you're going to come together.
Yes, yes. So the second main theme is principles. Honor is the governing code of the conduct for all men that we've already described for you, and those who are the characters in the Men of the Iron Mask, and it determines whether or not the four musketeers will be on your side. So in order to be honorable, the men sometimes must act counter to their own self-interest. So they should go maybe against their own principles, but for the principles that the group has.
Yeah, now they were best of friends in the original Three Musketeers story, but here they have different responsibilities, they have different challenges to think about, and so they start breaking apart from each other.
Yes, and it may just be a lamentable side of human nature to give some strategy against one another for our own benefit. The Man in the Iron Mask is a study in loyalty and friendship and how power can actually affect them both.
So this book is kind of the darker version of the original Three Musketeers story. The past figures heavily in this novel, and by the end, King Louis XIV has ushered in an era of absolute power. Historically, that was true. His word is law, and he accepts no dissent.
Yeah, and one way to view this book is to see it as the end of an era. So the dissolution of a famous friendship, musketeers, and the end of fractured loyalties within a kingdom.
Yeah, so essentially he's talking about France of that time and making a comment of how when France fell apart because of various factions, so did the musketeer friendship fall apart.
Exactly. Our next topic, of course, is justice, right? Justice is this novel's, in this novel is whatever the king says it is. So king said that this is fair, and then this whole kingdom would agree, which of course makes us wonder exactly how just the system is. Unlike what we saw in the Three Musketeers, justice in the Men in the Iron Mask is a subjective issue.
Keep this in mind, not a single character in the novel receives a just punishment at any point. It also seems that no one is really concerned with justice in the novel. They're all doing whatever they need to survive.
Yeah, maybe it's because of the problems with the king, or they wanted to change the king, so the system was a bit weak.
Yeah, it was a difficult time, and the king was becoming more and more powerful. So more authoritarianism, more less freedom.
Yes, exactly. So, of course, before we say goodbye, we're going to wrap up everything. So we started with the French writer Alexandre Dumas.
Then we looked at the story, of course, the story of the man in the iron mask and the musketeers.
Yeah, and the people who actually make up the story, these are the main characters, the musketeers who fight very bravely, right? Okay.
And of course, looked at the setting. We mentioned that it was in the 17th century, and it was in France, in the court of King Louis XIV.
Yes, and of course, we could never skip this main theme, friendship, that we discussed, and also justice and the principles.
Now, one more time, let me just go through the vocabulary list one last time. They were, if you remember at the very beginning, to disobey, treachery, to capture, plot, to destroy, to fuse, traitor, and suspicious.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Deril. And of course, now it is time to give you a homework.
Yeah, we have a slightly thought-provoking question, I suppose. There are many legends about the real historical man in the iron mask. He might have been the king's brother, who knows? Why does it matter that legends are sometimes taken to be historical fact after the novel has been written? Because now a lot of people do think that the man in the iron mask was the king's brother, but there's no fact behind that. Is this a danger with the power of novel? So that's the main question there.
მრავალი ლეგენდა არსებობს ისტორიული გმირის შესახებ. კაცი რკინის ნიღაბით. შესაძლოა იგი მეფის ძმაც კი იყო. რატომ არის მნიშვნელოვანი, რომ ნოველებში იყენებენ ლეგენდებს? და თქვენი აზრით, არის თუ არა ეს საფრთხე ნოველისთვის? რადგან შესაძლოა მათ სხვანაირად წარმოადგინონ რეალური ისტორიული ფაქტი.
Great, and they can send those answers to the address you see on the screen.
დავალებები გამოაგზავნეთ ეკრანზე მითითებულ მისამართზე.
Well, Ms. Maka, I think we're done with 17th century France.
Exactly, and all those fighting scenes and friendship. It was really interesting to discuss this book with you, with the audience.
Indeed, and thank you to the TV audience as well.
Of course. Thank you very much. Now it is time to say goodbye and see you next week.
Until next time, goodbye.
Goodbye.